wonder if you might bear with me as we start a little differently this morning. I would like to begin with a brief walk down memory lane for each of us. I invite each of us to think for a moment about the very first time you visited this congregation. For some of us who have been here for many years, that may be more challenging than for others. And for some who may be visiting for the very first time or second time, this may be a much simpler exercise. You can close your eyes if that helps. So thinking back, how were you welcomed? Did people speak to you? Did you make the critical mistake of unknowingly sitting in someone's pew? Was the service easy to follow? When to stand? When to find the hymns and where to find the hymns? Did you come down for fellowship time? Did you get the donut of your choice? I'd like to thank you for taking part in our virtual focus group. Please feel free to share your insights with our representatives following the service. My friends, how we welcome people goes a long way toward whether this place, or any place we may go in our lives for that matter, can take on that feeling of home. To start, it can make the difference in whether someone even wants to give someplace a chance. And before you think I am simply encouraging us to be more outgoing with our visitors and to make sure and save the good donuts for them, let me tell you it goes far deeper than that. The parable of the prodigal son is one of the most well-known and quite possibly over-preached passages in the entire Bible. It's right up there with the Good Samaritan and John 3:16. It is preached so often that one might rightfully question, what more can a preacher possibly have to say on the subject? But if you've ever met a preacher, you know that we are just confident enough to believe that we have something new to offer on just about every possible passage, let alone subject. So we're going to give this a go. For the purposes of this sermon series about coming home, there seems to be a very logical, if not obvious, hook, as this story tells us that no matter what transgressions we have transgressed, we are always welcome to come home. How might we say it here at NBC? No matter who you are and what mistakes you've made, you are welcome here. And that, my friends, is an important and valuable lesson and a powerful statement. But this morning, rather than focus our time on the son in this parable and all of his missteps, I want to talk about the father in the story and the role he plays in the parable. He is far more than just the gullible patriarch that hands over the son's inheritance without a second thought, although that is a wonderful message about the graciousness of God. Another potential sermon on this rich text for a future date. See what I'm saying about preachers? Now, what I want to do is have us think about the model that the parent in the story offers to us in terms of welcoming someone home. How do we welcome people home? Are we judgmental? Do we have expectations that we place upon them? The older son in Luke's parable most definitely brings to the table a fair serving of judgment. And on its face, it seems justified. I mean, how would you feel? He, the older son, stayed. He worked hard. He remained incredibly loyal. And his brother, he left. He squandered. He came back only when he had no other option. But the parent, despite what could be justifiable resentment and anger, throws open his arms to greet the wayward child. Talk about a model for extravagant welcome and boundless grace. Despite what seems to be a remorseful child coming home to him, there is no guarantee that this child's remorse is sincere, or that whatever change has taken place in the son will be permanent. Yet in spite of the gamble, the father celebrates that his son is home and welcomes him back into full, unqualified relationship. I could imagine today in our modern culture of high expectations that we might not be so immediate in our welcome, wanting some sort of guarantee of future compliance and no small amount of demonstrated remorse, if not consequences. After all, we expect that people will pay for their mistakes. The model, though, that Jesus gives us to consider shows no concern for anything punitive, and instead frivolously rejoices. Can you imagine that being the manner by which we welcomed people home to our community of faith? Whether they be returning after time away or arriving for the very first time. Hello! So good to have you with us. Come sit with me. Have you met Nancy and Steve and Nancy and Jim and Kristen and Lance and Craig and Nancy and Dale and Nancy? As an extrovert, I will say this seems like a great idea, but I have to think the introverts among us would cringe at the notion. Yet this is the kind of welcome we are given to emulate, at least in spirit. Enthusiastic, sincere, loving welcome. Should we choose to cast our vision forward on this notion, and perhaps even in our story, we might realize that this sort of approach to welcome does not end with the greeting stage. For when the father in our story throws open his arms to welcome this prodigal child, he is very likely setting in motion significant change in the household. For no longer is only that which conforms to previous norms and expectations celebrated in his household. This parent has celebrated that which flies in the face of the status quo. When there is no cost to be paid, no expectations placed upon the divergent child, things in all likelihood will never be the same again. And this seems affirmed in this story when the father essentially explains to the older son that what he expected to happen will not come to pass. Friends, it's a new day in the prodigal household. But that is what happens when we open our arms wide to welcome others into our home. If that is, we hope that they might make it their home as well. For those who come do not set aside who they were before they arrived. They bring that into the community. And that is to be celebrated, for that is what adds richness to the community. I, for one, could not imagine a community of people just like me. It would drive me, all of the me's, crazy. Yet I tend to think that the things I like are the best things. I may even prefer things, even in my church, the way they are. So previously, when I said that the welcome we offer cannot end at the greeting stage, I meant that the openness we offer in that first moment must be carried forward. For we are welcoming people who have been traveling many different paths. We are inviting them to lend their spice to the recipe that makes the Manhattan Beach Community Church. There's a great passage earlier in the Gospel of Luke. It is toward the end of the 5th chapter. And it describes a scene just after Jesus has called Levi, the tax collector, to follow him. They all go to the home of Levi to dine. And Jesus sits with tax collectors and other sinners. As is so often the case, the Pharisees, who seem to always be lurking about, take issue with the crowd with whom Jesus is choosing to associate. They say something to the effect of, "Why are you dining with those people?" And as is so often the case, Jesus shuts them down with a pithy line about physicians and the sick. Great stuff, but not my point here. Instead, if Jesus is giving us this example of who it is we are supposed to be dining with, reaching out to, welcoming, making our home with, then we must expect that this home will have to change and grow and evolve along the way as we together continue to define and redefine this place we call home. Again, let us think for a moment of how we were greeted when we first came to this place. Knowing all of you, I have to believe it was a warm greeting, and that is wonderful to be sure. For I know we all share the joy of new faces among us. I know also that during his tenure as interim senior minister, Reverend Michael Obenhauer offered a lesson on Hospitality 101, a lesson that had significant impact. But I also want to push us. For welcoming people home to MBCC, whether they are new or whether they are coming back from some time away, does not end with the greeting stage. Welcoming people home means that we welcome the whole person, no matter who they are and what mistakes they might have made, no matter what path led them here. It means setting aside our expectations for conformity and the fear of what the future might hold, and instead embracing possibilities. And welcoming people home means we open ourselves up, not just our arms to embrace, but our whole selves to be truly impacted by their presence. For that is when we know we are home. When we are invited to be our true selves, and when we are truly celebrated for all that we bring into the relationships that make this place feel like home. Amen.